The Wind in the Willows, Chapter 5, Toad's Adventures. It was a bright morning in the early part of summer. The mole and the water rat had been up since dawn, very busy on matters connected with boats and the opening of the boating season, painting and varnishing and mending paddles and so on. They were finishing breakfast in their little parlour when a heavy knock sounded at the door. "Bother," said the rat. "See who it is, Mole, like a good chap." The mole went to attend the summons, and the rat heard him utter a cry of surprise. Then he opened the parlour door and announced with much importance, "Mr. Badger." This was a wonderful thing indeed, that the badger should pay a formal call on them, or indeed on anybody. The badger strode into the room with an expression full of seriousness. "The hour has come," he said with great solemnity. "What hour?" asked the rat uneasily, glancing at the clock on the mantelpiece. "Why, Toad's hour," replied the badger. "The hour of Toad. I said I would take him in hand as soon as the winter was well over, and I'm going to take him in hand today." "Toad's hour, of course," cried the mole. "I remember now. We'll teach him to be a sensible toad." "This very morning," continued the badger, "another new and exceptionally powerful motor car will arrive at Toad Hall. We must be up and doing it before it's too late. You two animals will accompany me instantly to Toad Hall, and the work of the rescue shall be accomplished." "Right you are," cried the rat. "We'll convert him. He'll be the most converted toad that ever was before we've done with him." They set off on their mission of mercy and reached Toad Hall to find a shiny new motor car standing in front of the house. As they neared the door, it was flung open, and Mr. Toad, arrayed in goggles, cap and gaiters, came swaggering down the steps. "Hello," he said cheerfully. "You're just in time to come with me for a jolly... jolly..." His hearty accents faltered as he noticed the stern look on the faces of his silent friends. The badger strode up the steps. "Take him inside," he said sternly to his companions. Then, as Toad was hustled through the door, struggling and protesting, he turned to the chauffeur in charge of the new motor car and said, "I'm afraid Mr. Toad has changed his mind. He will not require the car." Then he followed the others indoors and shut the door. "Now then," he said to the toad, "first of all take those ridiculous things off." "Shan't," replied the toad with great spirit. "Take them off him, then, you two," ordered the badger briefly. They had to lay Toad out on the floor, kicking and calling all sorts of names before they could get his motor clothes off of him. "You knew it must come to this sooner or later, Toad," Badger explained severely. "You're getting us animals a bad name by your furious driving and your smashes and your rows with the police. Now, I don't want to be too hard on you. I'll make one more effort to bring you to reason. Come with me and hear some facts about yourself, and we'll see whether you come out of that room the same Toad you went in." He took Toad by the arm, led him into a room and closed the door. "That's no good," said the rat contemptuously. "Talking to Toad'll never cure him. He'll say anything." After 3/4 of an hour, the badger reappeared, leading by the paw a very limp and dejected Toad. His skin hung baggily about him, his legs wobbled, and his cheeks were furrowed by the tears so plentifully called forth by the badger's moving talk. "Sit down, Toad," said Badger kindly. "My friends, I am pleased to inform you that Toad has at last seen the error of his ways and has undertaken to give up motor cars forever. Now, Toad, I want you to solemnly repeat before your friends here what you admitted to me just now. First, you are sorry for what you have done, and you see the folly of it all." There was a long, long pause. Toad looked desperately this way and that. At last he spoke. "No," he said, sullenly but stoutly. "I'm not sorry, and it wasn't folly. It was simply glorious." "What?" cried the Badger, greatly scandalised. "Didn't you tell me just now in there—" "Oh, yes, in there," said Toad impatiently. "I'd have said anything in there. You're so eloquent, dear Badger, and so moving, but I'm not a bit sorry, really. On the contrary, I faithfully promise that the first motor car I see, poop, poop, off I shall go." "Told you so," observed the Rat to the Mole. "Very well," said the Badger firmly. "Since you won't yield to persuasion, we'll try and see what force will do. Take him upstairs, you two, and lock him in his bedroom." "It's for your own good, Toady," said the Rat kindly, as Toad, kicking and struggling, was hauled up the stairs by his two friends. "No more of those incidents with the police," he went on, as they thrust him into his bedroom. "No more weeks in hospital," added the Mole, turning the key. They descended the stair, Toad shouting abuse at them through the keyhole. "I've never seen Toad so determined," said the Badger, sighing. "However, we will see it out. He must never be left an instant unguarded." They arranged watches accordingly and strove to divert Toad's mind into fresh channels. But his interest in other matters did not seem to revive, and he grew apparently languid and depressed. One morning, the Rat, whose turn it was to go on duty, went upstairs to relieve Badger. "Toad's still in bed," said the Badger. "Can't get much out of him. Now you look out, Rat. When Toad's quiet and submissive, then he's been very clever. There's sure to be something up. Well, I must be off." "How are you today, old chap?" inquired the Rat cheerfully as he approached Toad's bedside. "Molly's going out for a run round with the Badger, so I'll do my best to amuse you. Now jump up, there's a good fellow." "Dear, kind Rat," murmured Toad, "how little you realise my condition, how very far I am from jumping up, now, if ever. But do not trouble about me. I am a nuisance, I know." "You are indeed," said the Rat, "but I'd take any trouble on earth for you, if only you'd be a sensible animal." "Then, Ratty," murmured Toad, more feebly than ever, "I beg you, for the last time probably, to step round to the village as quickly as possible, even now, it may be too late, and fetch the doctor." "Look here, old man," said the Rat, beginning to get rather alarmed. "Of course I'll fetch the doctor if you think you want him, but you can hardly be bad enough for that. Let's talk about something else." "I fear, dear friend," said Toad with a sad smile, "that talk can do little in a case like this. By the way, while you're about it, would you mind asking the lawyer to step up?" "Oh, he must be really bad," the Rat said to himself as he hurried from the room, locking the door behind him. "I've known Toad fancy himself bad before, but I've never heard him ask for a lawyer. I'd better go." So he ran off on his errand of mercy. Toad hopped lightly out of bed as soon as he heard the key turn in the lock. Then, laughing heartily, he dressed quickly and, knotting the sheets from his bed together and tying one end round the window, he slid to the ground and marched off, whistling a merry tune. It was a gloomy luncheon for Rat when Badger and Mole returned, and he had to face them at table with his pitiful story. Meanwhile, Toad was walking briskly along some miles from home. "Smart piece of work, that," he remarked to himself, chuckling. "Poor old Ratty, a worthy fellow, but of very little intelligence. I must take him in hand some day and see if I can make something of him." He strode along till he reached a little town where the sign of the Red Lion reminded him that he was exceedingly hungry. He marched into the inn and sat down to eat. He was about halfway through his meal when a familiar sound made him start and fall about, a trembling all over. The poo-poo drew nearer. The car could be heard to turn into the inn yard, and Toad had to hold on to the leg of the table to conceal his overmastering emotion. Presently, the party entered the room, hungry and talkative. Toad listened for a time. At last he could stand it no longer. He paid his bill and sauntered round quietly to the inn yard. "There cannot be any harm," he said to himself, "in my only just looking at it." The car stood in the middle of the yard, quite unattended. Toad walked slowly round it, musing deeply. "I wonder," he said to himself, "if this sort of car starts easily." Next moment, hardly knowing how it came about, he had hold of the handle and was turning it. As the familiar sound broke forth, the old passion seized on Toad and completely mastered him, body and soul. As if in a dream, he found himself somehow seated in the driver's seat. He swung the car out through the archway, increased his pace, and, as the car leapt forth on the high road, he was only conscious that he was once more Toad at his best and highest. Toad the Terrier, the lord of the Lone Trail. "This ruffian," said the chairman of the bench of magistrates, "has been found guilty of stealing a valuable motor car, of driving to the public danger, and of gross impertinence to the police. Mr. Clerk, what is the very stiffest penalty we can impose for each of these offences?" The clerk scratched his nose. "Some people would consider," he observed, "that stealing the motor car was the worst offence, and so it is. But cheeking the police undoubtedly carries the severest penalty, and so it ought. Supposing you were to say 12 months for the theft, 3 years for the furious driving, and 15 years for the cheek, which was a pretty bad sort of cheek, judging by what we've heard. Those figures added together tot up to 19 years. Better make it around 20 years and be on the safe side." "Excellent," said the chairman. Then the brutal minions of the law fell upon the hapless Toad. They loaded him with chains and dragged him from the courthouse, shrieking, praying, protesting, across the marketplace, below the portcullis of the grim old castle, on, till they reached the dungeon that lay in the innermost keep. The rusty key creaked in the lock. The great door clanged behind them, and Toad was a helpless prisoner in the remotest dungeon of the best guarded keep of the stoutest castle in all of merry England.